to interview a lot of great people on my show, but rarely someone I have known as long as I have this gentleman, Mr. David Patterson, who was our criminal court judge. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Mayor. How are you, sir?
I'm great. It's glad to have you on the show.
Thank you, sir.
We go back a long ways. Back in the 80s.
It was,
at
early
some
80s,
point.
yeah.
We've known each other for a long time. You recently retired as criminal court judge back in the summer. How is semi-retirement going?
It's good. We got through the summer good, and when it got cooler, my wife and I decided maybe I needed something else to do, and so I've joined another lawyer here in town, Seth Crabtree, a young man that has a good business. Invited me to join him, and now it's Crabtree and Patterson.
So you're back in private practice.
I am, and I'm doing defense work, which I've never done before. So
isn't that a full circle?
it does seem like it is, yes.
So let's talk about there used to be a TV show on, This Is Your Life. So today, This Is Your Life, David Patterson. So let's kind of bring our listeners up to date. Originally born here or not?
Grew up in suburbs of Detroit.
Wow.
Father worked for Ford Motor Company. He was a labor relations manager, and so we lived in suburbs of Detroit and Ohio at one point. So
what brought you to school?
Well, we had a son, and my parents retired down to Florida. Her parents were still up in Michigan. We got halfway in between and found a beautiful place to live.
They never left.
Never did.
That's a story. I hear that over and over again. I think you and I first met when you started for Judge Bill Griffin, working for him back in the 80s. What did that job entail?
The federal government made money available to Tennessee for the juvenile justice. Juvenile crime was ballooning, and in '83 he hired me as his first youth services officer. So I was an administrator for the juvenile court here in Putnam County in 1983.
1983. He was a great judge, wasn't he?
He was a great judge and a
great
really
person.
fine man and a fine friend to me. He's the one that sent me to law school. He's the one that paid for my law school for 4 years.
What a great guy.
Yeah.
Great piano player too.
Yes, he could.
He was really good. I always thought the world of him. So you worked for Judge Griffin for several years, but then decided that you wanted to be a district attorney, assistant district attorney?
Well, he suggested that I needed to go to law school so that the two of us could be judges together. He saw the future and knew that there would be two general sessions judges, which there are, Judge Hudson and Judge Qualls, doing a fine job, by the way.
Right.
But he could see that there was going to be another one, and he said, you go to law school, we'll both be judges. And for 2 years he said that, until finally in '85 I applied and began law school at Nashville School of Law. He paid for 4 years of law school, and he introduced me to the Supreme Court upon my graduation and my passing the bar exam. And but he never saw me become a judge, but a vision that he had was one that did come to pass.
We lost him early in life.
We did. 56 years old.
He was a
passed away.
terrible loss. But
it was.
So what made you decide that you wanted to go to work for the DA's office?
It just seemed right. My friend Bill Gibson was elected in '90.
Mm-hmm.
I graduated and was licensed in October of '89. He asked me to join him and his new staff, and I did, and worked with him for 16 years.
Wow, and that's a tough job, I know. And I want to break down kind of the prosecutor judge side of things as we go through the show. We're talking to criminal court judge David Patterson today, and kind of David's life of being a public servant for all these many years. All of a sudden you changed course. You worked for the DA's office for several years, and then you decided that Judge Bill was right, and you need to be a judge, so decided to run for office?
I did. That was in 2006 that I ran. Judge Sells was the judge at the time, and we put together a campaign that eventually succeeded. It's a 7-county race,
right.
The 13th Judicial District, and out of 40,000 votes that were cast, I won by 9 votes.
9 votes. we were talking earlier, I knew there was something special about that election, but
Very special.
you hear people say, well, my vote doesn't count. You're the perfect example that every vote counts when it comes down to the election, because 7 counties, 40,000 votes, and you won by 9 votes.
That's right.
There was a lawsuit about that too, didn't?
Yeah, well, I
Your
had won
opponent
by
opposed it, and
1 by 10, and after a lawsuit, they found that there was a felon that had voted out of White County. And apparently they thought that he voted for me. It took, I don't know why they figured that, but I wound up with 9 votes after that.
wow, so
Yeah.
9 votes, and you became judge and served from 2006 until just recently. So
June of 13, yeah.
what made you decide to
Excuse
retire?
me, June of 19, 13 years.
What made you decide to retire?
It was time. I have had the joy of having jobs that I've enjoyed. Not everyone can say that.
Right.
Every day that I was with whatever job I was with, it was pleasurable, it was challenging. It got to the place where when you know it's time, and it was time to do something different.
Everyone has a season, don't they?
They do.
And it's knowing when that season starts and when that season ends to change. And you had several seasons going from juvenile, working with Judge Griffith, being on the prosecutor side, working with the DA's office, and then judge for those years, and then now back in private practice, but you're on the defense side.
That's right.
That's kind of full circle, isn't it?
Isn't it? You know, I've always enjoyed helping people, and there are times when people make mistakes, and they result in them being charged with offenses. I'm looking to help them to understand what's before them and trying to get a good resolve for them. I believe I did that as a prosecutor and as a judge too, looking always to follow the law, but I've always enjoyed being with people and helping them. I think it really gives pleasure to me to do that.
That's what life's all about,
Isn't
helping
it?
folks.
Don't you think?
We've been talking about your life as a prosecutor and a judge and juvenile with Judge Bill, and so you've had a distinguished career, you have to say, and as we were talking earlier, 35 years basically. If you're enjoying what you do on a day-to-day basis, it's never work, is it?
No, and you know, I'm now in private practice, and my brain apparently wants to have some type of a challenge, is what it is
Yes.
also. And after 30 years of law, that's what it knows and that's what it wants, I guess. And so I enjoy taking things apart and putting them together, having to do with the law. But that's what my enjoyment is. And then having people that I'm doing it with, being in that society, in the legal community, has always been very enjoyable to me.
Well, you've done a great job, and it's all, as we talked about earlier, helping folks and enjoying the people you're around. You were with the DA's office for many years, assistant attorney, and you were on the prosecutor side. I know that had to be a tough job. Give us a little overview of that system and how it works and some of the experiences you had in that job.
The difficulty that you feel about that job is when you've got a case and a child has been hurt, and you know that it's been acts that are possibly going to stick with that child for some time. Those were the more difficult ones for me. I enjoyed the prosecution of them, but I did not enjoy what had happened to a particular young victim. You and I were on the scene of a major crime in the mid-90s when Tommy Burks was killed on his farm.
Absolutely.
I remember being up there, and we stood on that roadway where he was in his truck and had passed in his truck. And I remember you saying, fellas, we're in Putnam County, we are not in Cumberland County.
That's
And
right.
the Cumberland County Sheriff's Department was called out to that
Yeah.
scene originally, but for your being there, we were grateful that the district attorney's office, because you
That's
have to
right.
prove the venue of it, you have to
Right.
show. That was one of the most challenging of cases. That really was challenging.
That's etched in mine too. I'll never forget that day, the eeriness of the foggy drive up. It was a very foggy day, misty rain, and those cases, they stick in your mind. And I guess over and over and over though, on a day-to-day basis, you saw those murders, those child molestation, all those kind of bad cases. How did you deal with that on a day-to-day basis and not let that just get to you?
You know, my wife asked me the same question. So the prosecutor's office at the time, those that were prosecuting had a camaraderie. There was a closeness that we shared about that, and just a family-like atmosphere that we had, that we could share that with each other and not take it home with us. You know, there are some cases where a person is totally out of character and they wind up doing something that's very
Terrible,
bad,
yeah.
very bad. I'm back to the Tommy Burks and Byron Looper. It was so premeditated, it was so thought out and considered. I don't know that there were many cases that were like that we prosecuted. That was a very different type of case.
Where it was everything, he had everything planned out and so premeditated.
It was.
I know in being coroner and EMS director for all those years, was on a lot of those scenes, and a lot of them you think about, you just never understand what can be going through someone's mind to make them, commit some of these crimes, and you saw that on a day-to-day basis. I always felt like being in my job that I was in with the coroner and the EMS director now as county mayor, I felt like that was a gift that from God to be able to handle all those things and not take it home with you. Do you feel that way about your job?
Definitely, yeah. I really believe that there's a grace that if you're in the right place and you're doing what you should be doing, that there's a certain grace to it.
Yeah.
It's an ability, and it's not given. It's not what you do yourself. It's given to you. It's beyond your abilities to say, I'm not going to take this with me. I'm not going to let this affect me to some point.
To be able to do that, yeah, I agree with you 100%, and to see all the crazy things that we've saw over the years, and I always tried to leave it in the truck. When I got out at home at night, I left it in the truck. I didn't carry it in with me. That's difficult to do sometimes.
It is.
With all that we saw.
Is.
But
It is.
so you went from prosecutor to judge. So you're on one side, you're prosecuting all these cases, and I know that had to be fulfilling in a way, because people that had committed bad crimes, did bad things to people, you were making sure that the law was upheld, and you were on that side taking the people's position to make sure that if you violate the law that you're punished for it. Now all of a sudden you change and you're on the judge's side. Was one tougher than the other to be on the prosecution or the judge side?
I didn't think they were tougher. They were obviously different. There were days when I would be on the bench and I was wishing that I could be on the floor. I would see the case, and on one side or the other I was wishing that it would be presented a little bit differently, or how I might present it. That was one of the things. There are decisions that you make as a judge, and you decide whether a person will remain in the community on probation or whether they will go to prison. Mm-hmm. And those kinds of decisions are difficult. You're very much affecting a life of a person, his family. You're affecting a community and what you're saying to a community about what it will tolerate and what it won't, and what should be allowed and what shouldn't. So it is a very large job. I'm glad I don't have it anymore, frankly. I'm happy to have something different and take a rest from that, so to speak.
And it wasn't just Putnam County.
No, it was a 7-county district.
You were in 7 counties. You traveled, going to these other counties to their courthouses, and that had to be stressful in itself, all the driving and going and working with different attorneys on a day-to-day basis.
Well, as you know, the driving is, you can either gear up to go in or gear down to come out. The driving was not difficult.
That was the relaxing part.
It was sort of the therapy, thinking it through and being done with your day. I enjoyed the driving more than you would think.
Well, that's great. You did a great job as judge. Our guest today is criminal court judge David Patterson, who just retired from the bench this year and is back in private practice and been a good friend of mine for many, many years. David's had a long, distinguished career in public service with General Sessions Court, prosecutor, district attorney general's office, and then 13 years as our criminal court judge. And we've been talking about the prosecutor side and the judge side. A lot of your cases when you were a judge, how's the ratio work out as to a jury making the decision versus you making the decision as a judge?
There's almost no cases where the judge is making a decision as to guilt.
Okay.
95% of what is done in the criminal court is either resolved by some agreement, or many cases are dismissed along the way, things that you find you're not able to go forward with as a prosecutor that the judge doesn't have to deal with. What the judge is primarily doing is making decisions as to motions, whether evidence will be presented to the jury because of constitutional issues, and then sentencing. After someone has been convicted, what will happen? Of course, the judge is in charge of the jury and the trial as it's going along, and he can make mistakes there too.
Right.
But the decisions, many times that he's making, have more to do with how many years, how the sentence will be served, and whether or not evidence is going to come before a court.
The sentencing part sounds to me would be the most difficult, of trying to decide with this individual. Does he go to jail? Is he on probation? Does he get life? Does he get death? Does he get all those kind of choices that you may have? In your mind, was that the most difficult part?
I think that it is. It was for me. You know, we're a changing society, and we're looking at drug addiction and drug use very different than we did.
Years ago, yeah.
Yeah, and where a person on probation would violate because of using drugs, there seems to be a view now towards rehabilitation. You have those that are selling, you have those that are distributing larger amounts, and that's a different situation. But as to sentencing, you really should look very closely at the particular individual. There's guidelines, and there's ranges of punishment that you can give, but whether a person is to serve that sentence, whether he's to be probated for that sentence again, whether drug addiction program is going to be the thing to do, because so many of our offenders are drug addicted offenders. That's where we are.
Let's talk about that. You and I go back to a time in our youth. Of course, I was raised in Macon County, small school. We didn't know what drugs were. There wasn't any drugs that we knew of. And then all of a sudden, you know, I think a lot of it happened after the Vietnam War and stuff. You started seeing the marijuana, the drugs coming back in our country, and then it's continued to grow over the years to, you may not agree, but I think we're in an epidemic.
I agree.
Society
I
of their
agree.
drugs.
I do.
You and I have both seen that firsthand of how people's lives are destroyed by those drugs, whether it be health reasons, and we're getting drug overdoses, people are dying. We average about 2 or 3 a month in Putnam County of drug overdoses where people are dying from them. You were seeing the other side, where that people were using drugs and then committing crimes, or they were selling drugs and everything. I didn't think it could get any worse, but it seems like it does. Is there an end in sight, do you think?
Boy, I hope so. I don't know what it's going to be. We're not going to solve it here with our conversation, I don't think.
No.
But, you know, there came a time when the medical field, those who make those decisions, had decided that pain was no longer a symptom, but it was a disease or a sickness.
Right.
And so we're treating pain. And in doing that, we have a large population that's not able to afford their prescription. And so I know of so many who receive 90 pills, 90 Schedule II controlled substance pain medication a month. And so
Just automatically.
they do. And so they don't have the funds to really run their own lives, and they sell them. $1 a milligram. You have a 20 milligram pill, 40 milligram pill, it's $40. And so that's something that is very different than when you and I were young.
Absolutely.
And what we've seen happen.
Yeah.
Then the other epidemic is methamphetamine.
Right.
It used to be that it was being made. There was a way of doing it where you took apart pseudoephedrine and you put it in cans, and then there was the one pot
Baked
method.
it, yeah.
Now what it is, it flows into our communities now from
Other countries and stuff.
other countries.
Yeah.
Comes up from the south, and that's what we're dealing with.
What do you think the answer is, David? Jailing the people isn't the answer, is it?
It is not. I mean, they'll give up their children before they give up their addiction. That's large. That addiction, that thing that does that, and that particular drug is just a very large factor in our communities, in this community.
See, so many people, I actually had a lady call me last week looking to set up a group, grandparents raising their grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
She said the dad was in prison, the mom had been in prison, got out, and ran away, and so they're having to raise the grandkids. And it all goes back to the drugs, and Sheriff Ferris gave some stats at a meeting that I was at recently where like 92% of the people that are in jail are there, not necessarily that they made drugs, sold drugs, or used drugs, but drugs were involved with the crime somehow. They were on drugs when they committed the crime or something.
That's true. That is a good statistic right there.
I mean, that is shocking, David,
Isn't it?
that it's come to that point. Is treatment? I mean, where do we go from here, I guess? I mean, you've been involved in it for many years.
It's like we need a revival.
We need a revival,
That's
don't
what
we?
We need an act of, that's out of this world. I'll
We
just say
need
that.
we need a miracle
We do.
to come in, because
Yeah,
see,
we
so
do.
many of our young people are destroying their lives with the drugs and destroying their children's lives and their parents' lives and everything.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is. I was hoping you would have it today. It's a tough one, isn't it?
I don't. You know, the World War II and the Greatest Generation, as they called them, was very different than the hashtag just me,
Yeah.
sort of. You know, there's a hashtag me too, and I understand that, but I think there's a hashtag me.
I think so too.
A selfish way of life that looks towards pleasure and at any cost.
And doesn't care about what it does to other individuals.
Yeah, very different than what we knew in this community a few years ago.
I hope we can fix it, David.
I do too. We're growing. It's a beautiful place to live. I've always enjoyed Putnam County. I want to say I'm happy to have you as my mayor too.
Absolutely.
I appreciate
Well,
you.
thank
Always
you so
have.
much.
I've
You've been a
enjoyed
great
our-
friend and
Our friendship and what we've done together.
great public servant. I thank you too for your friendship and for your public service to go through all you've done as a working with the juveniles, district attorney, criminal court judge, and now back into private practice. That's a great career. And
Well, I got paid for it, you know.
You
It wasn't-
did,
It
but-
wasn't just volunteer work.
I know, but you could have chose a lot of other jobs that probably made more money, but you didn't, and you chose the public service. And
I don't know if
appreciate
I'd
that.
had the enjoyment that I had either.
It's all about being happy. And
It is.
thank you, David. I appreciate you being on the
I
show today.
appreciate you having me.